Hi, Holly. How
So,
are you?
guys, I'm really, really, really well, thank you. I must say to anyone that's watching, John has the patience of a saint. If any technical difficulty that could happen has just happened, so I might need to unfrazzle myself for a moment. But before we dive into the last interview, oh, the pressure. The last interview, I just want to say hi to all of our everyone tuning in today. So, welcome to Into the Weird. We've been away for some time. We've been prowling around Twitter Spaces more so than my YouTube channel. So, John very kindly has agreed to join me today. So, welcome into the Weird. We're an exploration into the unknown, the unexplained, and sometimes the unbelievable. I'm Hollywood. Yes, my real name. And I am often the guide on a journey beyond the boundaries of the everyday, ready to challenge perceptions and turn the extraordinary into the ordinary. So, together, me and my viewers and listeners, we like to delve into the mysteries that spark our curiosity. And I like to seek out truths that elude our day-to-day lives and maybe, just maybe, shift our perspective on reality. There's my spiel. So, buckle up, everybody. We are in for a good show. No pressure on you, John, as we voyage into the weird. I feel like I need a sound effect that goes dun, dun, dun at this point. So, ladies, gentlemen, beings of the world, whoever else is tuning in, welcome, Mr. John Ramirez. Clap, clap, clap. So, I've got a little bit to say about you, John, before we get into it. So, I hope I don't cause any red faces. So John, as a high school student, he toyed with the idea of becoming a lawyer, an engineer, or even a spy. But defying his father's advice, he initially delved into electrical engineering at the Illinois, which I just learned how to say because I'm a Brit. I was calling it Illinois, which is definitely wrong. The Illinois Institute of Technology, but soon realised that really wasn't for him. So in 1973, John enlisted in the Navy, stepping into a path that would change his life. He excelled in the advanced electronics program, an experience that piqued his interest into the intelligence field. Heeding the CIA's advice, he then pursued a degree in political science from the George Washington University after his naval service. Upon graduation, a fortuitous opportunity, I'm really into the word fortuitous at the moment, an opportunity arose at the CIA. They were seeking former military intelligence specialists with electronic surveillance skills. And John fit that bill perfect, naturally. So after enduring what I can imagine was a very rigorous security process, he was officially sworn in as a CIA officer on June 18th, 1984. John's impressive and very impressive 25-year career at the CIA was marked by extraordinary revelations and involvement in some world-changing operations. But his journey hasn't really ended there with his retirement from the CIA in September the 30th, 2009. Instead, and many of our viewers will know, he stepped into the limelight, masking previously possibly undisclosed aspects of the UAP phenomenon. And what I've appreciated in all the interviews I've watched, John, is your openness in discussing matters that perhaps really have been discussed so publicly by a former government official. And for me, that's certainly put your presence in my sphere. So today I have the fantastic privilege, thank God the technical difficulties are over, of delving into John's world, what John's about. So yeah, let's get to it. And I'm going to pray the Mac and Apple gods don't do anything crazy now. So, John, thank you so much. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you for adding the adjective impressive. I didn't put that in my bio, but thank you for adding that. I appreciate that very much. And I'm ready to answer any of your questions. And so let's go.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So we will dive into it. John, this was one that I was really pondering on a couple of days ago. Your insights onto the higher consciousness aspect, which is really my bag, of the UAP phenomenon, and its impact upon the government's perception, I think, is really, really intriguing. The kind of realization that these manifestations could be connected to a higher consciousness being, perhaps ones that were worshipped as gods. This seems to maybe have shifted the government's perspective. So with this in mind, I'm super curious to know your thoughts on the following. How do you believe the exploration of consciousness and its connection to the UAP issue phenomena can shape our understanding of the phenomena and their implications on humanity?
Yes, indeed. I believe that the consciousness aspect of the phenomenon was there at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
If we are to believe the narratives told about Roswell by witnesses that are now part of the Roswell story, we know that there was some telepathic communication with one or more of the survivors of that crash. And we keep hearing that the communication is through telepathy. And so if we look back at CIA's programs, you will note that a lot of the early programs had to do with the exploration into the weird, if you will. And so we have, yes, so we have like the MK Ultra program and its predecessors. The first one is called Project Chatter, believe it or not, with the Office of Naval Intelligence. So Chatter, that's interesting. That started in 1947. And that eventually became the MK Ultra program, which was more about behavior modification, more so than mind control. But they did explore psychoactive substances like LSD and other substances, such as psilocybin, in a way of expanding consciousness. And so the early test subjects, when they took these substances, reported seeing things that did not appear to them in our 3D world. And so that probably had some kind of influence from the early UFO program, because the people who did these experiments were also involved in the UFO program. And for example, the early UFO program at CIA was done in the life sciences division. And life sciences, of course, is more about physiology, psychology, everything to do with this phenomenon other than the aerodynamic and aerospace components of it. Those components were held in the physics and electronics division at CIA. So one side did like, how do they fly? And the other side did like, how are they communicating? And so that's a big clue as to CIA's focus into consciousness, which became later the remote viewing program we all heard about. And remote viewing program is basically almost like a projection of one's mind to some other location. Ostensibly, it was done for spying purposes, for espionage. We're projecting the remote viewer into a secure location that he or she did not have access to physically. And so that's another extension of that telepathic, what CIA calls psychoenergetics. There's a whole bunch of words CIA uses, but psychoenergetics, telepathy, telekinesis, all of these high strangeness type programs were at CIA. And I still believe that there's exploration of these capabilities in terms of expanding human consciousness and also like accelerating or advancing human potential. And I'll throw out another little nugget for you. We've heard about the super soldiers.
Indeed.
And, you know, that goes into the realm of conspiracy theories that people don't believe or may believe there were super soldiers. And I think in the government, it's more, instead of saying super soldier, they would use the words enhanced warfighters. You know, that we are very good at using euphemisms to stand for something. So there are enhanced warfighter programs to increase the capability of an individual soldier in a combat situation. And some of that might involve being able to communicate covertly with other soldiers or with higher command. And so does that involve any kind of introduction of something between mind, body, and something mechanical or electronic, that could be probably a compartmented program. But those are the kind of things that the defense component called DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects activity, in the Biological Technologies Office. So DARPA, DARPA, then Biological Technologies Office, BTO. Go look them up. Just Google them and see all of the programs that they're involved in. And it's unclassified, but you have to read in behind the lines to discern exactly what they're doing. So consciousness is really huge as part of this, because without consciousness, what's the use of even, they're just lights in the sky and visitors from someplace else, but they're communicating with us. They're experiencers, they're channelers. So what is the message is more important than how the message flew here.
For sure. My journey into this world, I'm like yourself, an experiencer since childhood, and I could talk about orange orbs till the cows come home. And my kind of step into this world, shall we say, was certainly through the CE5 heist protocol, and that's kind of what I'm quite known for here in the UK. I lead expeditions to go out into the field and use our consciousness. And I wonder, what's your take? I know Jim Semivan was quite about CE5 and other notable sort of figures that it should be done with caution. I wonder what your thoughts are about whole human initiated contact, or CE5 spheres.
Well, I would think my colleagues in the intelligence community will tell you that they are aware of CE5 protocols, but they would caution, be concerned or be wary of who you might invite in.
Yes.
That's the big variable. I don't play with Ouija boards for that reason, because I do believe that there are forces, I don't know what to call them, but entities, forces that may not have humanity's interest first and foremost in their mind, and that they've just been here since forever. They're like part of the earth experience, and they've been depicted in ancient literature and ancient art, and we always have this demonic figure. But I would say that the contact with the visitors who are arriving to us now and throughout history are not demonic, though some may cast them as demonic. But I acknowledge that there might be earth forces that have been here residing with us that may have this contact with humans, that the humans will perceive as being harmful and not very friendly. And I just mentioned skinwalkers at the Pentagon. That book documented a lot of these contacts, which they call the skinwalker hitchhiker effect. And that is a book that was approved by the Defense Intelligence Agency as being unclassified. So they don't endorse what's in the book, but obviously that program occurred and that research was explored.
I've just finished that book, actually. I've just got back from my holidays. And yeah, that was the book I read. So it's interesting that it's come up. I wanted to sort of delve on to, from your perspective, what do you think the role of non-human intelligence has played on our civilization's technological progress over the past 50 years? Because we've progressed significantly. Do you think that is because of perhaps the NHI involvement?
We just need to go back to ancient myths and legends, which I think should be reread as lost human history. And so the ancients documented these occurrences of contacts. And of course, I just give you one example. Prometheus brought humans fire, and brought humans fire when the other gods did not want humans to have fire. And so you can read that myth as well. But that's an allegory. We look at these myths and legends as allegories of history, a retelling of history, an oral history, everything starts to make sense, especially when we look at earth religions that humans have developed from that early contact. And so there's always a divine being or divine beings involved in earth religions. And so in my mind, I would substitute that for non-human intelligence, and that they were here to help us, and that some of them were in conflict with each other themselves, and they may have fought for their predominance in human life. And so those who wanted to bring us fire, those who wanted to enlighten humans, those who wanted to have humans eat from the tree of knowledge, per se, let's say that, were punished, were cast off. And those who wanted to control that narrative, our relationship with the divine, they won out and established kingship and queenship among humans. And along with that, we also have priests and priestesses as interpreters for the king from that divine message. And just recently in the UK, of course, we had the coronation of King Charles III. And, he held an orb in one hand, right? And that represents the world, the worldly things. And that scepter represented the divine right of kings to rule over the world. And that's why we always see these monarchs holding an orb and a scepter, as this is where I get my authority from. And then who anointed King Charles III? Yes, the Archbishop of Canterbury, right? On behalf of the Church of... So this is just a recreation of a ceremony that existed since the early dawn of humans, when that first leader out of the cave brought that tribe out of the cave and started like little villages and towns. That there was always someone like divinely anointed to be in charge of everyone else. In the United States, we inaugurate the president, one hand on the Bible, one hand raised, and swears an oath. So help me God. Now, where did that come from? That's all coming down from ancient times of their relationship to us. But I think now they're coming to us mostly with a message that, hey, we live on this planet too. We lived here alongside of you. You just didn't know us for who we are, and you thought that we were gods. And some of us presented ourselves to you as gods in order to have some kind of dominion over you, to try to organize you. And we gave you knowledge. We gave you math. We gave you science. And if you look at the Sumerian texts, they knew a lot more about the world than we give them credit for, because we look at history so linearly, that, we are the pinnacle of knowledge. And before us, they didn't have the knowledge we have now. What I think what happened was that they did have the knowledge. That knowledge was lost or suppressed by other humans with agendas. And now we're rediscovering that knowledge through science. But through that science, we're going to rediscover our connection to the divine, to these non-human intelligences who've been here, who want to help us not destroy ourselves.
That so perfectly takes me into my next question. You've got a couple of people mentioning about our sound. We did have some technical difficulties, so I hope you are all able to hear it. We probably are streaming through a different sound than the mic, but we're on, so we're here. But anyway, into my next question. In many UAP encounters, we've frequently had messages concerning environmental awareness, or stewardship of this planet, or protection of our only home. I'm always drawn to the Ariel School incident, and as children were given that message. from your perspective in your interactions in this world and in this space, what's your interpretation of this communication, and what's your thoughts on why? Well, for me, it's quite clear why, because we're doing some serious damage to our only home. But what's your thoughts around that, John?
The same as what was conveyed to the students at Ariel, to you, and to many others, that we are very poor stewards of the planet. That giving dominion to humans over the planet does not mean that we can do with the planet what we will. And so we have done things in the name of progress that actually in the long run has hurt the planet and hurt ourselves also.
Great.
And so, for example, just the environment, as you mentioned, but I focus on what we did with nuclear technology, something that could have provided us with very clean power if we had selected the right nuclear technology, but we didn't. In the United States, they continue with uranium mining, because not only does uranium provide at a very high purity rate, when they actually can enrich it to like 95% purity, it creates something that is fissionable. That's something that will explode. But at a much lower enrichment, it can provide nuclear power. But they didn't pick something else called thorium. In a melted salt reactor in thorium, it would have provided us with clean nuclear power with very little radiation and a very short, what we call half-life. That it's radioactive, even though very low, it's radioactive for a much shorter time. That could have been manageable. The reason why we didn't pick thorium is because, well, first of all, there wasn't the technology to build a reactor that wouldn't corrode with salt. And secondly, you can mine thorium all day long and you can't make a bomb out of it. So let's go with uranium and make bombs and nuclear power plants. That's what we selected. And I'm thinking that, they may have a solution that does not require things that will be harmful to us in the long run, like uranium.
Mm-hmm. It is, I have a small child, and I often think, what state are we leaving this world in for the future? And it's something that really affects me quite a lot, but I won't delve too much into it. So, John, myself, I know I've seen many interviews you've given. You stated from a young age you are an experiencer, and I caught recently your wife had seen some of the orange orbs. Arizona's very busy, the skies, and we have a place here in England that I go to quite frequently, and I've had orange orbs visit me all my life. I didn't quite know what they were, but could you shed a little bit more on your personal experience with these orbs, and what has happened to you that perhaps you might not have disclosed in the past?
Well, it might, yes, yes, it might interest you that my wife is of Welsh descent.
Oh, I see all of our activity in the Welsh Hills. So there you go.
Yes. She is of Welsh descent. She is also of Irish descent as well. So Welsh, Irish, and a little smattering of German. But
wow.
She's been a lifelong experiencer, and I have as well. I would say this, that the messages I get primarily was for a mission for me to accomplish later on in my life. And that everything I've done in my life led me to have the wherewithal, the means to accomplish that mission. So I knew from an early age that I wanted to be in the Navy. And being in the Navy gave me my very first clearance and introduced me into the world of intelligence. And I was also interested in politics, as you say in my introduction, that I wanted to be a lawyer. That's one of the options I had. I wanted to explore politics as well, and also wanted to be a spy. I wanted to get into the CIA or some agency of the US government. But going back to the law, I always felt like, well, maybe that's a way for me to get into the government. of being a lawyer, and maybe I had political aspirations as a very young teenager, because I grew up in the 60s, and I grew up in what is known as the Watergate era of the revelations of the Nixon administration and Watergate. And there might be people who don't know what I mean by Watergate, and that was the attempt by the Nixon White House to infiltrate the Democratic National Party headquarters in Washington, D.C., in an apartment building or an office building called Watergate. So I had that interest that was always constantly there, with the Vietnam War raging on in the background. So that was that interest. But, you know, as things turned out, I had that interest. I went into the Navy. I got out of the Navy with a background in intelligence, in technical intelligence. I went into the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., where I got just a bachelor's degree in political science. But together, the combination of the two, in my senior year, there was an ad in the Washington Post newspaper, of all places, advertising for positions for people who have had a military signals intelligence background. You know, apply here, you know, send your resume. And this is what I did. And it took a year or more. And then I went through the entire security process. And I was invited to join CIA. They called me up and say, pick a date for you to, congratulations. You made it. You're a CIA officer. Pick a date to report. And so I reported, and I happened to work in the office or work with the office that had the legacy UFO program since 1947, the successor of that program, and eventually actually worked in that office directly. And I've been there ever since, throughout the rest of my CIA career. And it was there that I was exposed to many of the things that I was allowed to talk about by CIA, because everything I've said, I put it in a letter and I put it in slides, PowerPoint slides, and sent it to CIA for review. And it all came back as being not classified. We won't endorse anything you say or anything you put on those slides, but certainly not classified. Go forth and go ahead and disseminate this to the public. And so had not all of these things come forward through that contact that I had all throughout my life, I wouldn't be here speaking with you right now.
It's incredible. And I was thinking about this last night. You wear two hats. So you're an experiencer and you're a former intelligence officer. And that must really create an interesting interplay of perspectives. And I was trying to reconcile how I would work that, and I would really love to understand and hear more about aspects of that, of your life that intersect and influence each other. So you're an experiencer, you're a former intelligence officer, and how has your professional background impacted on your personal experiences, and vice versa? Like, it must be an interesting space to occupy.
Yes, and I would consider them synchronicities. Many people use the word synchronicities, but these are like things that occur in one's life that cannot be explained by just mere coincidence or serendipity. It seems to have been, I hate to use the word orchestrated, but things have fallen in place that were meant to fall into place, and things fell out of place that would have hindered the progress. And so that's the best way I can describe it. When I entered CIA, I didn't go in there because I wanted to research UFOs, even though I had a lifelong interest in UFOs and in my contact experiences. That wasn't the purpose. I was there because I was interested in that type of work, and it was a way to utilize my training in the Navy at a much higher level. So what I did in the Navy was mostly at the secret level. And at CIA, I can then take the skills I learned along with the skills taught to me by CIA at the next higher top secret level. And so there's something that I chose as part of my life to join the U.S. Navy. but that
Mhm.
led to the opportunity to know more about what I learned in the Navy. But in so doing, then here comes this information through CIA. So there's one. And also, as far as continuing contact, they really got my attention when I was in CIA, because that's when I started feeling um, like that the contact was very frequent and somewhat more, I would say kinetic. That is, they really wanted to get my attention. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't negative per se. I wasn't afraid of the experience, but what happened was that this is when I started getting right nostril nosebleeds between 3 and 4 a.m. I start getting visitations at night by these beings that I could not see the face of, but they seemed to be shrouded in a cloak.
I know
And
that.
also, um, I as a continuation of this almost, we mentioned telepathic conversation, this communication between me and them. And I've had one I would call negative experience where I saw a being that most people would describe as reptilian coming from the living
We
room
will
into
come
my
on to
bedroom.
that shortly. We will come on to that shortly, John. Please
Yeah.
do continue.
And that's the one where I was fighting it and punching it, and I had claw marks the next morning of something
Wow.
happening like that. Skeptics will say, debunkers, oh, you just clawed yourself, or you scraped yourself. No, no. And the following evenings, I saw a green shroud, a mist in my bedroom with these sparkles in it. And when I looked at it, I felt very safe and protected. The message from that was that, don't worry, we will protect you. And so go back to sleep. And so that's personal outside of work, but it informed me of more things in work, because that right nostril nosebleed led to a nosebleed that happened at work, which led me to be examined by CIA doctors, and they detected a surgical incision in my right nostril. That I never had surgery in my nostril, but they said, yeah, a surgeon went in there, and it's not a cut, it's a surgical incision, and may we remove something, maybe remove some debris, which I agreed to. And to this day, I've never received my medical records. They told me at retirement that my medical records are the property of CIA. In my medical records, there's a history of where I went to as part of CIA operations, as well
Uh-huh.
as the inoculations I needed to go to that foreign country. And so
Right.
obviously, they can't release it all, and I can't even get it redacted for them to release it to me. What I did was that I wrote to them and said, I know a doctor that I waive HIPAA, and HIPAA is the permission granted to waive your medical records. I don't know if they have
Right.
the same thing in NHS, but that's what it is. And so I think that was done, and I was told that you will not get your medical records, but there's a good chance the doctor will get those medical records, and that doctor is associated with the intelligence community and have the clearances and compartments to look into my medical records. So that's
Gosh.
sort of like a nexus of something that happened to me personally and professionally that kind of melded together.
Gosh. That's going to give me something to ponder on. Wow. That must have been quite a hard thing to sort of digest as well. But I might end up texting you later, like, John. Anyway, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. And thank you so much for sharing that. That's very personal. But I am going to shift gears. And it was a question that I've been asked over the past couple of days to put forward to you. And it's something I've
Uh-huh.
been mulling over. So
Mhm.
looking ahead, um, well, in more recent conversations, you've referred to disclosure as scheduled dissemination. With my
Yes.
northern accent, it's been quite difficult for me to get those words out. So, scheduled dissemination. Could
Mhm.
you peel back the layers on this concept and maybe shed some light on how you believe it actually functions?
Mhm. Well, I come from the perspective of having been in CIA when there was absolutely no impetus to disseminate anything, because CIA's had the legacy program since 47, maybe before there was a CIA. Excuse me. Allergies here in Arizona. And so the CIA has had, and its predecessor organization, at least there were two, one immediately after World War II, and then thereafter, there's the Central Intelligence Group. They had the portfolio to look at these kinds of events. And so there was that legacy. And in 1952, there were craft seen over Washington, D.C., and that set the official Washington world in a tizzy. And that's when, and this occurred in July of 1952. Thereafter, there were meetings held, sponsored by CIA and the other parts of the government, to handle this occurrence, handle this event. So what happened? We thought that before, we just had these crashes, and we were able to retrieve, bodies or maybe some survivors, but we have parts of craft and we have bodies, and now they're showing up. What's going on here? And at that point, an officer in the CIA, which I can reveal because he's in the public record now, his name was Ed Tauss, Tauss. I'm not breaking any kind of NDA because he's in the official CIA record. Ed Tauss was responsible for the program to disinform the public. And it started in 52 in earnest. And at that point, all of the movies started to look like scary aliens are coming to take over the earth and control our minds. Because in 1950, there was a movie called The Flying Saucer, which was the first UFO movie ever made by Hollywood. The producer of that movie actually credited the authorities in help making this movie. And the movie plot ended up being that the saucer was reverse engineered. How's that for disclosure in 1950? And in 51, we have the classic, the original, the Day the Earth Stood Still. And at the very end, I urge people to find that on YouTube or whatever. There's a speech provided to the leaders and religious leaders and political leaders of the planet, saying the reason why they're visiting us is because we are destroying ourselves, that we have nuclear weapons and we're destroying ourselves. That's why they're here, and they're going to watch us. And when we get ready to clean up our act, they'll come back. But if we don't clean up our act, they'll be back to help us clean up our act. That was the whole plot of The Day the Earth Stood Still. And of course, the alien was a humanoid, a human-looking person with a artificial intelligence robot behind him. How much disclosure can you get before 1952? Right. Things are going positive. 52 and beyond, scary aliens attacked. And it's not until recently that the messages have become more positive and incorporated a time travel or time element in the plot. And so one of my favorite more recent movies is called Arrival. And that one was about, the heptoids, these beings with like 8 arms, and devising a language to interpret their ink blot messages. And that also had a time travel kind of theme behind it. So I think the more recent disclosure, the soft disclosure through entertainment, has been more positive. I believe that the part of this controlled dissemination is to release more information to the public starting in 2017, a 10-year program, I think, because in 2022, Lou Elizondo said, find a hobby for 5 years and they'll all come out. So 22 plus 5, 27. So maybe 2027. But I think that the initial part of that disclosure is to at least acknowledge what Dr. Gary Nolan has stated at the SALT I conference. My gosh, just 18 minutes. And that's pretty much what the government could potentially say real soon now. And I don't think he would have felt comfortable saying what he did just a few weeks ago had he not known that the government will officially state this in the near future, not in years, but in months to come.
Yeah, I must shout out Jay, our mutual friend from Project Unity. He captured what Gary said, and he posted it to his channel. And I've shared it with projects. I've shared it with my family who think I'm a bit crackers because I'm into this topic, and I'm like, someone of his caliber and status and everything, he's not just woke up today and decided to say this publicly. So I'm so glad you've touched on that, because I'll link it as well to later on for everyone. If you haven't seen it, you should go watch it, right?
People should see it. Yes.
Very informative. What do you think, thinking about scheduled dissemination then, what might we expect to learn from those that could be steering the dissemination throughout this year and next year? Is there anything more you think that is on the horizon that you could perhaps share?
I think as part of the schedule, I like I said, the very first thing the government needs to admit, one, is that the government has lied for decades. And we know that. Anyone who's been an experiencer, who has been in direct contact with these beings, will tell you the government is lying about this. Anyone who has seen craft with their own eyes will tell you the government has lied about this. The government needs to confess that, yes, it has lied to the world about the reality of the phenomenon. And secondly, the reality of the phenomenon is this: it's not foreign adversaries, it's not swamp gas, it's not the planet Venus or meteorites, or you just saw an airplane. It's non-human technology that's flying, non-human. And the government knows that. And apparently, Dr. Nolan knows it too, because he revealed it all, that this is what the government knows. And not only that, we have parts of craft, we have metamaterials. Didn't he not say that we have a craft? I don't know. I have to go back and look at the transcripts. But he revealed a lot. So as going forward, beyond just stating that, which is more of what I call the hardware aspect, we need to look at the wetware aspect. Wetware, borrowing a phrase from William Gibson, who wrote the book Neuromancer, wetware. That the interaction of these beings with the humans, with us, is the most important aspect of the phenomenon, because that's where the messaging comes through. We can't get there. That's way out there. We can't get there until we talk about it's non-human, the technology. And then the next question is, okay, if it's non-human and it's technology that's flying, who's flying it? And introduce the non-humans into the narrative. And if the government knows about these non-humans, has the government been interacting with these non-humans and not telling us? I mean, there's a lot of conspiracy theories about that. And maybe it's time to take it out of the realm of conspiracy theory and say, yes, we are aware that there are non-humans on the planet. Gary Nolan said they've been with us a lot longer than we think. So there you go. And then, that will lead up to further disclosures in that schedule. Ultimately, we got to get to the point where if they're here to help us, we as a planet, not as the United States or the UK, but as a planet, we need to get that help together as humanity, because that help doesn't belong to the UK or the United States. We should not have a monopoly on the technology or any of the information provided by these non-humans, who could care less if we're British or American citizens. They don't know. I mean, it's planet Earth. How we organize our tribes, they could care less. So I think as it goes forward, I think more information will come forward. I hope at the end, it will be a positive message where we can actually start helping the planet, helping ourselves, and helping them, interact with them, so that we become, I'm a Star Trek fan, a spacefaring planet. Yes.
Me too. Me too. It's one of my guilty pleasures in life. And I normally don't admit it so readily. So, John, you have a kindred spirit because I'm a Trekkie through and through. I knew I liked you, John. Now it's even more. um, Recently, Mario Woods, Rob Salas have spoken out from, whistleblowing, and I found that inspiring, brave.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, and obviously given what Dr. Gary said, do you think we're likely to hear more voices from within the covert, community, the intelligence community, maybe those that have been involved in crash retrieval or
Mm-hmm.
reverse engineering programs? Do you think there's an appetite for more people to come forward now, or is the risk still too much for them, do you think?
Well, I think everything Dr. Nolan stated, I think is ready to be revealed. So he did
Right.
mention crash retrievals. He did mention reverse engineering. I am hoping to have someone come forward, either Admiral Wilson or Dr. Davis, to confirm
Wow.
and validate that those notes were from a real meeting about any of the programs for developing technology from whatever we were able to acquire. And I would add the word gifted by them, because I find it hard to believe that an advanced technology would crash like the way they did. It's almost like we'll wreck it and then you can open it up and pick out the pieces you want. I think that's what's actually going on with some of these crash retrievals. But to your point, yes, I think that will come forward. And again, referencing Dr. Nolan, I think anything that he stated is something that will be revealed in the coming months, maybe next year at the latest. But I think that's all been given a green light for folks who know this information to come forward with it.
I know over the years, we've disclosures coming. It's next week. It's next month. There's always it's coming, and I know from speaking to people in the community that I do every day, there certainly feels something in the air. There seems that progress is things. The pace seems to be picking up, which can only be a positive thing. If whistleblowers and people of like yourself, people like Gary, people who are public in talking,
Yeah.
do you think there's going to be conversations around zero point energy or collaborations on alien tech development that kind of have been previously off limit? Do you think those topics are going to be more in the forefront? And adjacent to that, if people are coming forward talking about, zero point energy, yada yada, knowing what you know, do you foresee any sort of disinformation campaigns that would perhaps be launched to counteract anyone coming out and speaking about these aspects, perhaps?
I would say this, and I might get in trouble with one of the services here in the United States, the United States Air Force. I would think that if any branch of the United States Armed Forces would object to any part of this disclosure, it is the United States Air Force.
Right.
And that is because they are the stakeholder with the most to lose. And what could they lose? They could lose the technology that they have been able to derive from the source technology, that is the non-human technology, and were adapted for human use. I don't believe we can accurately reproduce one of their vehicles because there is a consciousness aspect to how those vehicles propel themselves. And the consciousness aspect is very important to this. So we might have been able to build something with these amazing aerodynamic characteristics, but nothing like what we see of the 5 observables that Lou Elizondo talks about. Nothing that can go from, as we say in the Navy, from the deck, that is the surface of the sea, up 80,000 plus feet in a matter of seconds. Is there something that can fly and stay hidden and get to that some interesting place very fast? Probably yes. Could that be shaped like a triangle? Probably so. I don't know. But I haven't been read into any of these specific programs. I just know that there is awareness, the fact of that there is awareness of these programs in the government. So that's how I stay out of trouble. There's nothing I can say that can be validated or verified saying, yes, I know what vehicle it is and I know how it was designed. In fact, I'm not even an engineer. I couldn't even describe it to you. I'm not a physicist. I couldn't describe it to you. I wouldn't know how it worked. But is there something like that? I would say that's a pretty good guess that that's true. So yes, and in fact, the people coming forward is part of what will happen kind of officially, that is sanctioned by the US government. They're not whistleblowers. Let's remove that title from them. They are witnesses. They're going to give testimony as witnesses, not as whistleblowers. They have the sanctioned permission to do so. And a whistleblower is someone who is outside of that sanctioned permission and wanted to reveal something about something that the government is doing that could be a wrongdoing or a misappropriation of funds or anything like that. And in this case, what I call the disclosure I'm referring to and what Dr. Nolan alluded to is from witnesses who have the permission to say what they're going to say. Now, could they be disinformation? Again, I don't think any of the people coming forward will disinform the public because their stories, I believe, have been checked out. There are ways to check out their stories, and there are ways to validate their credentials that they actually did have the top secret sensitive compartment and information level clearances, and they were read into these specific programs, these compartments representing these specific programs, and that in their service record, it's verified that they actually were at these facilities. So it's quite different from other civilian disclosure efforts, which is mostly speculation, and you may have a smattering of people who know. But I would say that what's coming later this year will have a lot more verification and validation and much more vetting.
Wow. We will journey back to that point in one of my next questions. I am really going to shift some gears right now, so do forgive me. Your intriguing slide 54 on Jay's when you did the presentation with Jay from Project Unity. I think that stirred up quite the debate. I rewatched the episode recently as I knew we were going to be chatting. And it highlighted the supposed involvement of reptilians in our societal structures. Can you possibly elaborate on their purported interactions with government and civilization, perhaps?
If people had paid attention to what I said, I use the word speculative, informed speculation. And so when people think of reptilians, they think of lizards. No, they're not lizards. They're people with reptilian ancestry that may look quite human to us. And they may have had some development into humanity. There may have been many, many non-human races, speculative again, that helped us evolve outside of natural evolution. Otherwise, we will still be living like our primate cousins right now. We developed at the same time as mammals, as primate mammals. Why were we accelerated? And so that might have some influence beyond natural evolution. So when I put forth that slide, again, going back to like, how is the world really structured? How is it actually ordered? I wanted to convey the idea that what we consider as humans, you and I and everyone listening and watching right now or in the future, that we may have had some advancement from other beings, one of them being these reptilian beings who are not in any way like lizard people. Some people see lizard people in their encounters, but they may have been beings that have been here a long time.
Right.
And so it's interesting, though, that when I look at some of the official logos launched by the National Reconnaissance Office, which is the actual secret space program of the United States intelligence community, they launched secret spacecraft in orbit. I can say that much, that they use these lizards as part of the logos. And I found that to be really strange. And they're lizards who are crawling all over the earth. So where did that come from? I would say this much. A lot of folks read books and they look at books and they think that, oh, this is just all conspiracy theory. It's just somebody's speculation. But I want to give a shout out to Mr. Farrell. I think Joseph. Is it Joseph Farrell? I pay attention to his books because they seem to be very well researched, especially those about Antarctica. And also give a shout out also to Mr. John W. Warner IV, who wrote the Little Anton series and other books looking back at the history of the early programs and its connection back to the Germans and their search for the Atlanteans.
Yes.
And so, who's controlling the world? Who is the shadow government? Who is the deep state? I hesitate to say I don't know who they are. I couldn't identify one or the other saying, yes, you're a member of the deep state or shadow government. But it seems that there's always people in the background who are not in government that seems to be pulling the strings. And so I point to the organizations we do know about, like the Bilderberg organization. The Bilderberg organization. I would point to the Bohemian Club in San Francisco.
Right.
As an example, there was once the Trilateral Commission. There's these other organizations like that that seem to have the pulse of the world. And
in that sense,
yes, and in that sense, you look at the Bohemian Club and their meetings at the Bohemian Grove, and past and future presidents tended to be in attendance. It's almost like, okay, you're next. Why is that? I don't know. So again, speculation, folks. It's not that I'm saying that we're mind controlled by reptilians, but we need to look beyond what the media tells us to look at and what the schools taught us in our history books. We need to look beyond that. And so that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you for putting a bit more kind of narrative to that. What I've always found quite interesting is when you start looking at the Bohemian Grove, some of these type of things, there's often a splash of occultism. And that's kind of the area that I'm super interested in something I've studied all my life. And you start to look at the mystery schools, the unseen, and for me, you start to, if you look hard enough and you can connect dots and you can speculate, the dots start to becoming a lot clearer. And I think with the massive amount of social media now, the fact that we can communicate, well, when I'm not having technical difficulties, we can communicate with all sorts of folks from all sorts of walks of life with all various degrees of knowledge. I really do think that there's a tapestry of the occult in this somewhere, and it's something I'm spending a lot of time delving into. So thank you, John, for putting a bit of note to that. Considering the sort of long-standing role of NASA, CIA, Air Force in managing some of the UAP related information or not managing outwardly, For me, and I may have this wrong, and I'm a human, it appears that there might have been an intention, or there is an intention to eventually phase out the cover up. Will we get the chance to witness historical UAP footage, maybe held back by these organisations with everything that we're speculating to happen? Are we going to be given the, here you go, guys, this happened? Do you think that will ever happen, or will we move to a different phase?
Well, let me give a message to those who are part of this disclosure event happening, that unless you guys release the actual data to back up what these witnesses say, it will all be for naught, because it's just more verbiage out there cluttering social media. So I firmly believe that they should actually allow civilian scientists who are not part of the US government or part of any government access to what they have. Show them the metamaterials, let them have the metamaterials for their own research. Let them see parts of craft or the entire craft if you have one. Let them see that and go from there, because as far as the government is concerned, what they did was more or less militarize the technology. They made something that was a super fantastic spy plane from the technology. And so that's what the Air Force wants to keep hidden. But in order to progress further, we need to incorporate a non-government, I would say, participation as part of this disclosure. And let's finally show what we have in terms of actual videos. And for Lou, 23 minutes, you've been teasing for I don't know how long. Let's see it. I want to see that 23-minute video that he says will knock your socks off, right? I want to see that. I've never seen it. I would say that NASA should actually show what the astronauts have seen and photographed, as well as what the astronauts have witnessed in their travels to the moon and up in orbit. Excuse me, again, clearing my throat. So I do believe that there's actual evidence that the government can show, but part of this disclosure needs to be the revelation of that evidence, and not only like show and tell in front of a congressional committee, but actual like participation from the civilians as well. And maybe that will encourage other governments to also participate in this. I know that your government is holding on to a lot about Rendlesham Forest that they don't want to acknowledge, even though you know that a lot of information come out, but there's always that plausible denial from our governments. Always a plausible denial. They always find an angle to say, nah, that didn't really happen. This is what really happened. And the witnesses who come forward, they're pretty much disparaged. You know, they're made to feel like that they are the disinformation people instead of the governments being the disinformation people. And they embed people in social media to do so. They embed people because I know what might be going on. I know what I know. And then when people in social media come forward and say this or that person, I don't trust them. I never trusted him. And I know that that person is part of that disinformation campaign. If it's honest skepticism, I love it. People should be skeptical. Don't believe everything your government tells you, because we know the governments have lied in the past. Do your own research. That's important. But you know what really irks me? A debunker who may know better. And I'm not saying all debunkers are like this, but a debunker who actually may have been told to debunk certain things and for compensation. And that just irks me. And I hope none of the debunkers that are out there are doing so because of that they're actually real debunkers. That's fine if you want to find a natural explanation for some phenomenon. That's fine. I think I welcome it. You know, if he's saying that, this is more scientific, you have to like look at the science explanation. That's fine, because it informs all of us to do that. Because you know, some of the things people see in the sky, I saw 3 things flying in the sky in a triangle shape. Well, they don't know that the Chinese fly a satellite in triplets that look like three things flying in the sky, or that other countries may fly things that look like two pairs, a pair of
Right.
satellites flying in the sky. So there's formations of satellites, but those satellites don't do fancy maneuvers up in the sky like that, the way I saw when I went to Sedona, Arizona. Melinda Leslie, her UFO sightings tour, I went there
Yeah.
through her night vision goggles, and I saw this. And I know enough about satellites to know that satellites don't do that. So yeah,
It's so
definitely.
it's so interesting. I often will take out complete skeptics, non-believers, and just sit and be quiet and connect with yourself and look up. And you tell me that what you're seeing makes if it's a satellite, we can check. We can check if it's a craft. But when they're dancing and colours are changing and they're going from here to here very quickly, what could that be? And I work with a lot of experiences, the work that I do here in the UK, and I really feel that sometimes when people see and they we can rule out, satellites, we can what we can check ourselves. Obviously, we can't always check out government stuff, but when we can rule out that it is a satellite or it is a aircraft of sorts, it's really interesting when you see you see them change sometimes in front of your eyes, and to me that's quite a special point, that you can take people from being super skeptical to just maybe believing in the possibility. And I think that's quite special. um you've obviously hinted and said um a significant revelation unfolding this year, and I know I'm going to deal with UFO Twitter after this, so God help me. um Unfolding later this year, one that potentially involves figures from the intelligence community acknowledging the existence of non-human technology. I believe it was John Brennan, former CIA director, said something in 2001 that
Mhm.
certain UAP may represent another form of life,
Yes.
which is interesting. And James Clapper validated the reality of the UAP in a public appearance, I think, in the same year. And I don't know if you can answer this or not. Do you think that they could be among the voices that makes some kind of revelation or anticipated announcement later on this year?
They certainly should be invited to be a witness.
Right.
Absolutely, they should be invited. I met John Brennan as a retiree. Every year, CIA invites retirees for a reunion back at headquarters, and I haven't gone to any of the recent ones, but I went back in August of 2016. And John Brennan at that time was still the director of CIA. And I think he would know a lot of information, not only as director of CIA, but in his previous posts at CIA, that he would have been exposed to a lot of information about what's going on. So, yeah, I would say he should be. He ought to be, and maybe he is.
I feel like I need that sound effect again. Dun, dun, dun. Um, I know I'm terrible for coming up with sound bites. I know you mentioned, I think I called it recent, sort of a couple of months ago, I'm not too sure where, that disclosure is not going to come as some big congressional hearing or people in front of a podium saying they're here. It's you've mentioned that it's going to be a bigger event. Could you unpack that a little bit for me? Are you able to? What does this big event look like? If I'm airing into areas you need me to shush, you can just shush me. But what could you put some narrative to what this big event could possibly be, John?
I would never shush you in any way or form. I would say this, though. The point being is this, that the congressional hearings, although we are interested in what goes on in the U.S. congressional hearings, most of the world could care less. They're not watching,
Right.
right? I mean, who wants to watch a congressional hearing? And here in the States, you can probably watch them on YouTube if the committee decides to show them live through their YouTube channel. But for the most part, a lot of things happen in Congress that we're not aware of. And so they don't have the audience. And here in the States, we have something called C-SPAN, C-S-P-A-N. That's the network that broadcasts the proceedings of the House and Senate and congressional committees. And how many people actually watch that? It's like watching paint dry on your wall. I mean, unless you're a policy junkie like I am, you're not going to watch that. So it will have to be something more dramatic, and it'll have to be something in the order of, and I want to put in my plug now because I like what they're doing. I would say that it has to be something in the order of what Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, will be doing. He is presenting something called Disclosure Fest. And it's going to be happening over November 11, 12, 10, 11, and 12. And why is that date, November 12, so significant? Because Tic Tac, November 12, 2004. So I think that's an ideal time that Disclosure Fest will happen. Another plug, there's something called Contact in the Desert that will be occurring this coming week. And
Wednesday, I believe, John. It's looking like it's going to be a great event.
A great one, yes. And I would say this: if you can't make it to Contact in the Desert next weekend, maybe you have enough time to plan to go to Disclosure Fest in November of 2023. And I would tell Jimmy right now, if he's listening, or maybe word could get to him, he should call it Contact in the Casino, because it will happen at the Luxor Hotel. That's the Luxor is the one that is shaped like a pyramid, which is, to me, like, what a fantastic place to have a Disclosure Fest inside a pyramid. That is just absolutely wonderful, with the Egyptian motif as part of this disclosure. And he has some wonderful guests on board with him. It should be a lot of fun. I don't know if I can go or not. I don't know if I will be attending. It's toward that time, which I think things officially might happen. And so we'll see. Between, Science Bob McGuire, many people know Science Bob McGuire. He said at Spaced Out Radio Vegas party, which I did attend, he actually said before Thanksgiving. And so what they're doing at Disclosure Fest happens before Thanksgiving. So we may have a melding of the civilian Disclosure Fest with government Disclosure Fest. I don't know if that's in the works or not. I hate to take away the thunder from Jimmy Church's Disclosure Fest, because I think it's a fantastic thing. But if what the government is doing beforehand, my goodness, wouldn't that be an interesting conversations going on over at the Stairways to the Stars, Disclosure Fest 2023. Interesting conversations if that follows after what the government will say. I just wanted to put a plug in because I love Jimmy. Yeah, he's a great guy.
Great guy. And I know we spoke before about this. I will link some of the details onto my platforms about it. So, John, I have 2 questions for you. This is your final, you mentioned this is your final interview before disclosure in November, hopefully. Can you share why you decided to say, no more, I'm going to chill? What's the reasoning behind that?
Because I don't want to say anything or speculate anything beyond my knowledge that might jeopardize what's going on. So I don't want to be the reason why the Air Force has a reason to come in and stop everything, or any other part of the U.S. government to stop anything. I don't want that to happen. I thought that this quiet period would be ideal to just gather my own mental health and physical health and everything, enjoy our Arizona summer, and see what happens, see what unfolds. and let
Right.
that unfold on its own course without any interference. And in fact,
Mhm.
I so appreciate Dr. Nolan saying what he did, because I can point to that and say, look, watch the 18 minutes. He was on for 18 minutes. Watch it, and
Mhm.
you get all the information you need. The only difference is that maybe toward the end of the year, instead of just Gary Nolan, you'll have many, many, many more witnesses coming
Mhm.
forward. Who knows, including Gary Nolan? I don't know, but he might be. And you mentioned uh, Director Brennan. He could be one. It could be other members of the intelligence community, as well as the military community coming forward. I will hope that would happen, that they'll be invited, and let that process happen, because I think they're hard at work. And I don't want to be the reason why, or anyone coming forward with any kind of like small knowledge, to
Mhm.
you to have that small knowledge misused by others who want to stop it. So, I mean, we don't hear from Lou Elizondo anymore so much. My colleague Jim Simivan, he doesn't come on anymore. I would like
Mhm.
fade away, fade to black. And so I would still participate. You might find me, as part of the audience. I would love to be in the audience for other people's interviews, for your interviews. I will be tuning in. But as far as directly participating in the public domain, I don't want to do that right now. And afterwards, I'll be happy to speak with Jay, because then maybe some of the things I do know that I can't speak about, maybe it will get revealed by others, and then I can speak about them because it's already out. And
Sure.
uh, maybe I can convince Jay that you should help him interview me on that last.
I love Jay. He's great.
Yeah, maybe that would be great. Or so yeah, I think toward the end, I'll be freer to come forward with some of the information I have. I was asked before if you were a witness before a congressional committee, is there things that you could say that you can't say now? And I've said the truthful answer: yes. Yes,
Right.
there are things I can say, but let this disclosure happen. That's the
Mhm.
official sanctioned disclosure, and then I can come forward with an interview that wraps it all up. And then you won't want to hear from me anymore, because I'm hoping that the other folks who are coming forward in the public, who actually have program information, would be freer
Mhm.
to speak about that. And I think you, Holly, and other podcasters will be fighting each other off, trying to get these key witnesses to be on your podcast. So I hope that's
They're
a
all
good thing.
friends.
Actually, that's a good thing to happen. And
It is.
so stay tuned.
So my last question, and this was certainly a question from me to you.
Mhm.
I've worked in PR all my life, so sometimes I can use some of my skill set. You've done so many interviews, you've spoke on so many topics, you're now taking a period of rest, as we've just talked about. But John, I feel like I need some kind of drum roll or something, the anticipation of it. Is there a question that you feel you've never been asked? Is there something that you wish one of us podcasters, one of us media people had just gone, John? So, is there a question you feel that hasn't been asked that you would like to bring into this arena? As your last interview for a while, is there a question that should have been asked that hasn't, and you would like to talk about
Wow, that question itself
it?
lead
That
me
took
to
me all
pondering.
day.
I don't know. I've pretty much stated a lot of information that I know that I could say. Um, I would
I've got
say,
your brain now.
yeah, I would say there is a question, but even asking that question might reveal the answer. And stay tuned until later. Um, but it has to do with the non-human presence already on the planet.
Wow.
And it has to do with that. And I think that will be coming forward, I think. It has to, because I always refer back to Dr. Nolan. He stated that, they've been here longer than we think. And so there might be some information about that. It's the interaction of these non-humans with humans. And I think that's the question, like, what is the nature of that interaction between non-humans and humans? And that's the question, I would think, because I think I can answer that based on the knowledge I have.
Wow. I think we've got an interesting few months ahead of us. John, thank you ever so much for deciding to pick a little unknown from the north of England with my terrible accent to have this chat with you. I've been super thrilled and super delighted, and we've journeyed a little bit into the weird. And massive thanks from me for joining us. We've got a lot of interviews. I'm currently speaking to a couple of people that we've mentioned throughout the show over the next couple of weeks. So we've got a lot going on. I did want to touch on the event that you previously mentioned, but I will drop that into my socials. And listeners or future listeners, you will next see me for UFO Twitter Week from the 7th to 11th, where I'm speaking to Anjali, who you of course will know, John, Mike Barra and Steve Merra and Marco Visconti, and a couple of special guests that I can't talk about yet. So if anyone just wants to know about UFO Twitter Week, catch me at that UAP girl to stay updated. But guys, we've journeyed a little bit into the weird. It's been interesting. I'm certainly going to have to go back and pick out a couple of these nuggets, John, and I'm sure UFO Twitter will be helping me for the next couple of hours. But as we come off there, I'll have a quick chat to you, John, if that's okay. But everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep looking up, because there's a lot to be seeing. Stay curious, stay winged, of course. Thanks, guys, for watching the show.
My pleasure to speak with you and your audience, and thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Jen.